Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce Sue. Sue's been a delivery lead at, she's been a partner at John Lewis & Partners for over 30 years. She started off selling uniforms, school uniforms and knitting needles on the shop floor, and then moved into IT later on, and has now become a delivery lead doing agile product delivery.
And I'd like to introduce Stephen. Stephen is a principal consultant at Equal Experts. He's worked for a number of different consultancies for a range of clients across lots of different sectors. So although he's a developer at heart, he's performed other roles along the way, such as solution architect and even been a scrum master for a while.
So we'd like to tell you a story. So we'll start with Once Upon a Time. This is the story of our team that we were part of, delivering online search. We're replatforming online search, and these are the ups and downs and things we found along the way. It is quite a long story. We are going to try to leave some time for questions at the end, but if we do run out of time, please feel free to grab us, one or the other of us, afterwards or later on in the party. Right, JL is a retailer in transformation. Just going well. So anybody who saw Simon Skelton and Steve Smith's talk yesterday will remember John Lewis. Can I just speak like this? Can everybody hear me? No? Okay. All right. Has been a retailer for 150 years. That's a long time. The retail has changed a lot recently as clicks are taking over from bricks, and a lot of pure play online retailers come along as well, which are disrupting the market. So anybody who didn't adapt had a very uncertain future.
So when John Lewis bought a website in about 2001, many partners, as we employees know, felt that would never rival the store estate, the bricks. Online shopping will never catch on, they said. We had letters to the chairman saying, "What have you done with our money?" But that couldn't have been further from the truth, because that website business became johnlewis.com. So 5 or 6 years ago, and on our second generation of that website, we were faced with a major decision to undertake a long, complex and expensive upgrade of the on-premise website that we had, or make a bold step, enter the cloud, and embrace the new ways of working that would go alongside that. And the board backed the website strategy, and Google was chosen as our digital platform. And we got underway on the third generation of the commerce stack, making way for productized ways of working in teams.
And the search was identified as a relatively complex but also discrete part of the old system that could be used as a good proving ground for new ways of working. Yes. So a good story has lots of twists and turns, which we're going to tell you about. We found ourselves trying to influence change as well as adapting to the change around us. And we still needed to respect the important demands of peak trading. So we thought if we managed to prove that new ways of working would introduce quicker development times, as well as making it more supportable and sustainable, then we would really prove this out. And our legacy would be more than just having a new search system.
So a little word about peak and why peak is a thing for us in retail. Many retailers trade for many months without making a profit, especially early in the calendar year. But when there's events and reasons to celebrate, then people go shopping. Hence, there are peaks and troughs to navigate, and making hay in a peak period can offset those troughs. If you can get that right across the year, you can make an overall profit. And the biggest of those events are often referred to in retail as the 3 peaks. So, namely, Black Friday, which falls at the end of November usually, Christmas, and the winter or Boxing Day sale as it's traditionally known. Thus, the significant proportion of annual profit in retail is made in a very few short months. Winter is therefore our busiest time in retail.
So each year, peak trading has a lot of planning that goes into it. And because it's so important, the risk appetite goes down, and it affects the amount of change you can do. So John Lewis has had idle practices for quite a long time, and in fact, I think Sue was one of the people who was in charge of putting it in place when it came in. And that meant change management was strongly and robustly applied. So around the peak period, the extra policies came in place to restrict changes. Any deployments over this period were seen as high risk and to be avoided. And this did mean that teams couldn't deploy new features over a relatively large part of the year, but that was just accepted as the norm. So we knew we'd have quite a lot of challenges coming up when we were trying to prove out new ways of working, because this is the context we were working in.
So good stories have multiple subplots that intertwine and work together, with most characters moving between them and contributing to more than one subplot. We've called out 6 subplots that were key to how our story played out, and everything that we discuss falls into one or more of these. And it's true to say we didn't get everything 100% right. Who does? But if we did, then it would be quite a boring story. So you'll see these themes running through the whole story as we continue on through the slides.
So I like stories that have maps in the front of the books. So here's a map. So we started off in the top left, team inception and discovery. Team members joined, we did some work. We hit peak 2018. It seems like a very long time ago now, but as many things, everything's been postponed. We improved our search, some winding path along the way, solid and live support for our search service. Peak 2019, and then we kind of, well, didn't quite go into the sunset. I think we just had a nice long sit down after that.
So in spring 2018, a small, hand-picked team with a strong blend of key skills entered a period of about 6 weeks discovery. And the overall brief we were given was really simple: to migrate search away from the old system and enable the legacy decommissioning, and use lean agile practices to do that. So for us, this was really new, and in the context of what we've been used to, our ways of working, this was truly empowering and very exciting.
Our product owner was happy to go with a very minimum viable product. I jokingly called it a very MVP, but it was important. It meant that we could go live to a small percentage of customers with a very basic search. And that, as soon as that happened, we knew we would start to learn, both operationally and from the way our customers used the search.
So even discovery as a term was actually quite new for us and our processes. We hypothesised that we'd be done with discovery when we knew enough to be confident that there were no gotchas. Nothing was going to catch us out, and we could start building. No more than that. And of course, without a stage gate or sign-off, as we'd been used to, we quietly got on with it anyway, because nobody quite knew what they were signing off or whether they had to do it. And anyway, it was not as if it would be wasted effort.
So our choice of implementation was microservices running in Kubernetes on Google Cloud. The John Lewis Digital Platform was being built by a separate team at the time, and so some of these choices were made for us. We were certainly fond of microservices anyway. The exact implementation was just something ready-made for us. So we went with that. We also used managed cloud technologies wherever possible. Google Cloud provides a lot of these things. PubSub Topics and Datastore, which is a NoSQL database, were a couple of the ones we used. And we wanted to deliver value. And that's a difficult thing to say about value. Sometimes it's difficult to quantify. But we wanted to build a search service. We didn't necessarily want to need to become experts at maintaining our tech stack. So these managed services were great. We call an API, it does something. And something like Datastore is multi-regional. It takes away some of your disaster recovery scenarios for you. You don't have to worry about if the data center catches on fire. It will be multi-regional, and it just happens under the covers. So that was great for us. We chose Elasticsearch as our search engine of choice for the search. And again, we didn't want to become experts at maintaining Elasticsearch or running it. So we looked at a few different vendors of Elasticsearch managed service and chose one of them.
Still you.
So we came up with a high-level design that described how data would enter and leave our out of the context. which was search. This was in the context of a number of other services that were taking place around us, because this was a sort of a long-term architectural view. We were just the first of many. So we had data coming in from other data sources. We had product data, digital merchandising data, various types of price data, various types of stock data. And one of our big things was to reduce dependencies, both technical and organisational, on other teams. This meant we could get on with our work while not being held up for wait for other people to do their work. A big example of this was, for all these data feeds I've mentioned, we were happy just to get the data from the source systems in the format that they had it. Then we would transform that within our system and save it how we wanted it. So we didn't have to wait for somebody else to do work for us to do that. Yeah. We chose Kotlin for development because it was established at John Lewis at the time, and there was a lot of support for it as well. Easy for people to pick up if they know Java.
Yeah. So now that we knew what the building blocks were, creating a high-level plan with target release ambitions really brought it all to life for us as a team. This is where the context of peak trading comes into our story. It was apparent that this minimum MVP that we'd agreed was actually a realistic target for pre-peak 2018. But would this be seen as too risky and too new for the business? So we weighed up risk and reward. And our second hypothesis was that if we could do that, we could meet our ultimate goal pre-peak 2019, a year later. There were a lot of hearts and minds to win over before that time, but we thought being a little bit live for peak 2018, yeah, that would build the foundation for the following year, and we really just had to go for it. So we did. Having a group of influential stakeholders championing this initiative was crucial. As I say, it had gone up to board level. We knew we were being given the keys to the next level for the John Lewis website teams. We had a duty to bring everyone with us, make sure that worked. We had regular early showcases. We built everyone's confidence around what we were doing. We built confidence around ourselves, for ourselves. And we really believed in what we were doing and that we were in the driving seat.
So during discovery and in the next couple of months after that, the team formed. The team formed of a combination of John Lewis permanent staff and external contractors from Equal Experts. And we ended up with 5 or 6 developers, 2 QAs, 1 delivery lead, product owner, and later on we got a BA, business analyst, not from the beginning though. And Sue commented often that we seem to have quite a diverse range of personalities, skills, experiences, but that we work well together. And a common thing was our professionalism, the right kind of professionalism from Gita's talk, and respect for each other.
So bringing his extensive search knowledge, our product owner was hands-on from the very beginning. And he was very much part of the team, not outside of it, inside of it. And the group as a whole, the team, was really carving out its identity. And we gave ourselves a name. We called ourselves Disco. I mean, a bit lame really, coming from Discovery. But, may not have been the most creative name, but it gave us great mileage in cheesy puns, playlists, and a logo. Very easy. And being 3 years ago, we were able to co-locate everyone in one office. That was a big advantage. We also managed to co-opt people from other teams who we needed to work with us for a short period of time, like middleware, to come and sit with us. And that was really, really beneficial too. We could make decisions quickly and collaboratively with those other teams and resolve issues quickly and collaboratively.
So communicating with our operations stakeholders is very important. We co-opted some people from operations to come to our stand-ups. So we worked closely with them and tried to bring them on the journey with us so they could see what was happening firsthand, not be surprised by anything later on. So this really bridged the gap, prevented the gap, I think, between us and them. And that helped us later on when they became good ambassadors for us and helped us navigate other teams and processes throughout the organisation later on. So we took some time initially to establish ways of working, which was time very well spent. And it's on the next slide, all the things we came up with. I was very pleased with a developer who joined slightly later in the thing, said, oh, he looked around at the things we were doing and said, this project really looks like it's set up to succeed, which I thought was a nice thing for him to have said.
Yeah, it's a shame you called it a project, but hey.
Yes, that's true.
Move on.
Yeah, please. Yes, so these are the things we discussed as ways of working. We wanted just enough process to keep us honest and keep us going, but not bog us down with anything. Very importantly, we decided quality was the responsibility of the whole team. We had QAs in the team, but it wasn't just their responsibility to make sure quality was high, it was everybody's responsibility. Continuous delivery, we embraced that. The Kanban style of working, we used Jira, but it's not so much the tool that matters, it's how we used it. We used it in the simplest possible way. We used only story tickets, a couple of bug tickets, I think, but we used the simplest workflow. There's no point tying yourself down with workflow, just any ticket can go anywhere on the board. Our definition of done was quite simple. It means it's live and customers are using it preferably. So we had a rota for running stand-ups. It wasn't just the delivery lead who ran every stand-up, we had a rota, everybody took a turn. That meant everybody was really engaged and invested in having the team run well and having all the tickets easy to use, all the data available. Single backlog, very important. Features, operability concerns, bugs, security things, all just in the same backlog. Makes it much easier to prioritize these things against each other and make value judgments against each other. Epics is sounds like a bit like nitpicking. Whenever we created a new ticket, because anybody could create a ticket, we made sure we had an epic. This sounds a bit like nitpicking, but it means if you create a new ticket, you need to think about where it lives. Does it exist in an existing stream of work? If so, put it in there, great. If it doesn't, then it makes you think, well, is there something we really need to do anyway? And if it is it something else? Is it something new we haven't thought about? Yeah, so we started with a very basic search and built on that. So the keyword search is where you type in words at the top, click it, but this was just a very minimum version of that. There was a lot more to come later on, synonyms, redirects, all kinds of things, but to start with, we were just sticking with something simple so we could deliver something soon, which was very important to us.
So being the first service fully on the new cloud platform was a freedom, even a luxury at times, but it was also a responsibility. It was early days, and we worked very well as two collaborating teams, us and the platform team, both building out something new. In fact, if anybody went to Adam Hansrod's talk yesterday, he talked a bit about the benefits of working together in this way. And learning from our experience, the platform team created their paved road for all future tenant services to follow, automating all the technical onboarding process that they'd done for search with us, so that what had been done manually for us could be speeded up and done better and more consistently for future teams. In fact, we did a retro with them when we'd finished the onboarding process, and they said, well, you know, you were our UAT, which I thought was rather nice. And as a consequence, this became an additional part of our legacy as a team, aside from the search service itself, which is really nice.
So we wanted to start as we meant to go on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in this next point here, which is they reach a topic in their own right, really. Infrastructure as code, tests of various types, performance testing, metrics, operability. It was very important to get all these things to start with. I think if you start with them, you get the benefits from early on, and you also get the benefit of never having to make an argument later on to take time out to include them. So if they're in from the start, they're just there and they work, and you just keep adding to them. So infrastructure as code, we use Terraform to define our infrastructure. The platform team, as Sue mentioned, were creating a paved road to make it easier for teams to onboard, and later on they automated some of this stuff. But wasn't automated in the beginning, so we set it up using Terraform, which was great. All our environments were the same, it was easy to deploy to production, you could roll back a deployment as well when any function change. It was great. Tests, we had the usual types of tests, unit tests, functional tests, a light touch integration test for our different microservices. The thing we tried to do was make sure none of our tests overlapped. Everything had to test something new, otherwise it was just taking up space, it was extra code we didn't need. So performance testing, we wanted to get this in very early. From when we had this very, very, very simple search, we thought if we start the performance test later on and it's slow, we'll never be able to know if it could have been faster. So if we start in the beginning with our simple search and keep performance testing regularly on every search build, we can spot if we put something in that's complicated it and slow it down, and then we can remedy that. So that was a good thing to have early on. And all the features we put in, we wanted to know how they would operate when they were live. So we put in metrics, put them on dashboards, we'll see a couple of examples of that later on, and thought about the operability of the service. When it was live, what would we do?
So we deployed as often as possible. The production environment of the platform was not available initially, but once it was, we started deploying to it as soon as we could, even though our customers weren't even using it. But because we'd defined all of our infrastructure in Terraform, deploying to production was simply a case of changing a few variables to deploy to the new environment. That was a great benefit of infrastructure as code. In fact, we proudly mentioned our quick prod deployment times at an awards interview, feeling really confident. But the audience who were listening to that said, that doesn't really sound possible or sensible to attempt doing stuff quickly. Okay, maybe we're doing something a bit new here. But deploying this way gave us the opportunity to do a soft launch to our internal users, allowing us to set a cookie which would provide access to the new API. So when we went live to customers, it would just be a case of directing them to our already deployed API rather than actually deploying anything for the first time.
So we tried to keep it as simple as much as possible. We tried to keep flexible and trust that our good design and flexible design would allow us to change and adapt to change later on. So we didn't try to future-proof anything, we didn't try to think too far ahead. We just solved the next problem in the simplest way possible as we went. So I mentioned we using microservices. We had 3 microservices to start with, 2 that were involved in indexing, 1 for handling the search requests. Eventually this more than doubled, we had loads, but we didn't need them to start with. When we went live initially, we actually went with only these 3. We didn't try to put APIs around everything. We had this slightly controversial situation where 2 of our microservices shared the same data store table because they were using the same data and collaborating on it. And the strict way of doing this would have been that one of them should have notified the other one and it should have called back and taken the data through an API. But they were using data store, and my take on this was Google employed some very clever people to make that very fast and bug-free. So if we just wrap it with something, we just slowing it down and introducing bugs. As I say, it was controversial, but anyway, it was quick to do and worked well.
We kept our search API format the same as the old search system had used. And we did this to ease adoption of the new API by the front ends that used it. It meant we did carry over some badly named fields, little used content, etc. But we felt that was a price worth paying, and we could iterate on it afterwards. I mean, nobody particularly seemed to mind.
So I said about keeping things simple. This looks complicated, but the top left is where we started. It was simple. As I said, there were 3 microservices, and there's Elasticsearch in the middle. And we ended up here about 18 months later. So as we added new capabilities, we thought about them and thought, does this belong to a new microservice? Can we put it in an existing one? Has any existing microservice become too bloated and doing more than one thing that needs to be split out? So that's how we sort of iterated through this cycle. I don't have a lot to say about this, it's just to illustrate how it grew.
So with live before peak, our target, our product owner wanted Black Friday traffic volumes to give us data so we could learn about our service and how customers interacted with it. So we added a few more features to that basic search. And it was still pretty basic, but it was ours. and it worked. And in fact, it worked really well. But Black Friday had operational appeal for us too. There was no doubt in the team, but there were quite a few people waiting to be convinced that new search had the performance required. For instance, the legacy system averaged about 90 minutes for a re-index of data and often needed some TLC for the operational team. But we knew that Cloud Search could easily smash that out the park. It would prove itself a worthy successor. And as per the rest of the website applications, the operations team were the first point of contact for out-of-hours support, and that was perpetuated through Peak. This was frustrating for the team. Search was the team's baby, and I've heard that term already today in another talk. But it was how we felt. Unlike any new parent, the team cared, and they cared a lot about their baby. And likewise, all deployments were going to be performed by operations for the peak period. Now, instead of a small army of people often executing through the night and with a frequency that was measured in weeks, the ops team would soon discover they could deploy to search in a matter of minutes, the push of a button, and they could roll back with equal speed and confidence. And this was a big eye-opener for them, and it actually made for brilliant live showcase material. We actually did an hour to some of our colleagues in the on-prem world and did 3 live deployments in the space of an hour, just repeating the same thing. And it was a bit of a pin drop moment. Big change for us.
So we had a headlines dashboard, which is one of the things that we could show the operations people, look, this is what our service is doing. I've got another version of this later on, so we'll talk about that later on. But we were aiming for build it right as soon as possible. As Sue said, it's a bit frustrating, we didn't get there immediately. And we'd made big steps towards it, but there was a lot to do still before we could get there. And we wanted to focus on getting our search service out to customers on Black Friday. So we didn't try to push too hard on too many doors. We just went with worked with what we had. The other thing is we had an easy fallback to the old search engine. We were using an A/B testing tool to direct 1% of customers towards our new search API. This meant we had an almost no-fail solution where we could just dial them all back to the old one. And that was an advantage of keeping the API format the same. It's easy to switch them back and forth. Yeah.
I was going to say, we started in July with that development to get us to our 1%. And by September, all that was missing was the sort of obligatory pen test that we had to have, and we just sat around waiting for the outcomes, none of which were really anything significant to resolve. So we'd achieved our first defined goal. 1% of web customers would be using Cloud Search on Black Friday. And I think you've got a prop.
Yes. So we used our disco ball dial. So we had these on the wall. We would ceremoniously, there's a picture of Sue doing it later on up there, but ceremoniously would turn this up to 1%. It did go to 100 eventually. So as soon as we did bring more and more customers on board, we would turn that and have it on the wall so we could see how far we got. I was going to say, actually, back to Geeta's thing, we've got this heart-shaped symbol there. We're quite emotional about the moment, so we're hitting our deadline, actually. So that's not one of the things we discussed up front of this talk, but there it is.
So we had everything that we would need to support in place. Runbooks, support rotor, metrics we could rely on, and we proved all these things out in BAU. And we had a 100% mindset. We might have been to 1% of customers, but our mindset was at 100. So supporting through Peak was a great dress rehearsal for those future years. And as I said before, many eyes were on us. Some of them are in this room, I think. But 1% of web traffic, that was an acceptable risk for that first peak. And we had that get out of jail card of being able to switch back to the old search if we needed to. We kept our stakeholders informed and reassured. And that was time well spent. Not that we had much to report or reassure them on, but we did keep those stakeholders up to date. But we had other stakeholders to consider as well. We knew that if we and our product conducted ourselves well, we were laying down a benchmark for others to meet. There were many more product teams waiting to follow us onto that paved road. And if we put a foot wrong, our friends and our colleagues, well, you know, they might find their journeys a lot harder. So we had to be good citizens. We had to be pathfinders for all who followed in our company. And an example is for daytime support, we had a hit person rater in the team. I mean, yeah, arguably at 1%, that's not necessary. But it was an example of that 100% mindset in action. It also sent the right message about where the ownership for that product lay.
So over peak, the performance of the search area was good. We had performance tested to way beyond 1%, so it wasn't surprising that it was good, but it was nice to have it happen. And no incidents on our side at all. We didn't need to scale up. We had the ability to scale up if we wanted to, but we didn't need to. One thing that did happen was the A/B testing tool we were using at that time had an outage for a while, which meant that our 1% of traffic actually disappeared and got sent back to the old search API, which was frustrating for us, but it wasn't an enormous thing. But it did lead to us considering building our own A/B testing tool, and there's some more on that later on. And as we were going through pre-Christmas, even during the middle of the peak period, the operations people did start saying to us, as soon as the change freeze is over, you can start doing your own deployments, which was really good thing to hear. So we'd made some investment in trust, and it was starting to pay off.
So in January, as peak tails away and customers tighten their belts, the risk appetite is reset. Peak had given us real insight to build on. Our product owner whipped out his shopping list of functionality and sharpened his pencil. We added some missing features, we iterated on what we'd built, and we were ticking through his priorities in the backlog. Our baby was growing. We moved on to the browse side of things, where customers navigate around the site in their search for products instead of just typing words in a box. And that brought a whole new set of challenges to be overcome, but it added more excitement as the percentages climbed.
You can see actually the dials are up there on the board. I think one of them was 1 and the other's on 0 or 5. I don't know. Anyway, so we were one of the first people on the platform, as you said, one of the teams on the platform. And when we started, it was new, and we were just working with the platform team, sort of informally, and we made up some things. There weren't many rules and for naming or anything at the time, so we just made things up as we went. But the platform was evolving. As more teams came on, it made sense to standardize things, have some conventions and rules for things teams should do when they're using the platform. And that meant that we had to retrofit a whole bunch of things into what we'd already done, which we found a bit frustrating at the time, actually. And because we had our own deadlines to meet, which were on a completely different direction than sort of going and retrofitting things. So this did cause a bit of friction between the two teams that 6 months earlier had been such good friends, actually. But we managed to prioritize things that were genuine blockers for either team and resolve those and then postpone the rest of it till later on. The other thing that happened was, search is quite hard, actually. You know, people type stuff into a box. Sometimes they just break a bunch of stuff into a box, and you have to figure out what they meant when they did that. So that is difficult to figure out. It's difficult to tune it. And sometimes they type in a brand name. That's exactly the same as another thing. Sometimes having 2 words with a space between them is the same as when the 2 words are together, but sometimes it's something completely different. Sometimes brand names have punctuation in them, which you need to keep in order to find it properly. So this took quite a long time, actually, tuning the whole thing. And the complication was, we'd gone down the route of saying, we can write our own A/B testing tool, which we called our Decisioner. It gave us an illusion of control, and that illusion was slowly shattered as we discovered bugs in our testing tool and inconsistencies in the analytics data. But we got there. We had a data scientist in the team who sort of helped us out with the statistics, and it just took a lot longer than we'd hoped it would, because we learned a lot probably more about A/B testing than we did about our actual search, but we got there in the end. And in retrospect, that was a thing where we didn't keep it simple. We decided we're going to write an A/B testing tool, and which is scope creep when you're writing a search, right? So we should have stuck with the other one. The other one never did have another outage, as it turns out. But we're trying to fix a problem we didn't really have by doing that.
So now that the team owned their own deployments, releasing daily was in our gift. In fact, daily became the norm in the Disco. And to help us visualise progress, we maintained a hill diagram, which is up behind me. And we'd like this in Discovery. We played about with this. It was a series of unknowns that we tracked up and over a virtual hill. Items moved from ground level up to the top of the hill as we figured them out. And from the top, the journey down the other side was about making those things happen. We broke down our quarterly and monthly goals into weekly ones. And that was a really effective way to link our quarterly goals, our OKRs, into our backlog. And for those backlog tickets that never quite made it to the board, but we talked about, we made a wish list instead, and we groomed that periodically to make sure that it was relevant and we didn't forget anything. Now, if you've read the Phoenix Project, change management is a major frustration for the heroes of that story. John Lewis had the concept of peer-approved changes. I'm sure many of you do. They're designed for change that's repeatable. And once we were allowed to use those, more than once a day was realistic. So we were just pushing that dial of what we could do. We had more empowerment. We felt closer to that ownership. It was all going in the right way. So as we iterated, we learnt more. We altered the percentage of traffic for both keyword search and browse, and sometimes that was up, and sometimes that was down. But our product owner was really good. He introduced regular data insight reviews with us. So daily, weekly basis, involving the whole team in those decisions. We could see when we were turning that dial up or down and why. The higher the traffic, the faster you learn. But it took a few months. But we did get there. We got to 100% on both dials. But you've got to be a bit brave to turn that dial up and risk something not working well and then have to turn it back. And it's arguably braver to turn it back. But it gave us a huge sense of achievement getting to 100% on both. And now our ultimate goal was very much in sight. We had the mobile apps to consume our search. We got them on board quite quickly, so we were really motoring. And that took us to about midsummer 2019. But by this point, winter peak discussions were underway. It's retail, right? You know, everyone's worried about the winter and getting it right. The fallback to legacy search was still enabled at this point. So we thought we'd better check that. And we quickly proved that was really no longer a viable option. So it really would be stabilizers off for peak 2019. So search was operationally coming of age, and we felt we were ready.
Something we had to be aware of was avoiding negative SEO impact. We're changing the search results slightly in some cases, dramatically in other cases, but that also meant navigation links, filters, and a bunch of other stuff on the page has changed too. And something else that came up at this time was we thought, we don't like the URLs on the website, we've got to make much better URLs. So we worked on that for about a month and then realized that would have a big SEO impact actually. And the marketing team would have to deal with different structure of URLs they weren't used to, so we rolled that back. And again, I think that was an example of a bit of scope creep. We thought we can do this, but actually we weren't keeping it simple enough. If we not tried to do that, I think we would have saved ourselves some time. We started to introduce data science. We had a machine learning expert and a data scientist working within the team, and we used to feed some of that data back in to the search to use as sort of informed ranking algorithms and sorting. And sometimes this data was computed sort of offline to us in a machine learning cluster, and then we would import the data that had been calculated. And it's quite pleased with the way this worked actually. Our architecture worked out to be flexible enough that we could have a bunch of extra data feeds coming in, and it all just fitted together quite easily. So as we were approaching the anniversary of our initial 1% go live, we had a real sense of pride in what we'd achieved. And I think actually the heart symbol could be on that one as well, actually. I think that's the ways of working one, but we could have put the little heart symbol there too.
Yeah. I mean, we've been empowered to and trusted to deliver. And we knew we were doing it well. And we didn't really have many bugs, did we, at that point?
No.
All looked good.
I remember looking back at one point actually and thinking, oh, it's quite refreshing. We didn't have one of those never-ending bug lists that some projects end up with. And I hate being in that position where you're continually re-evaluating everything on the list, reprioritising all the bugs. We just didn't have that. And I think it was a case of, well, a few things. One, the sort of quality mindset. Everybody had to be in charge of quality. And I think also we didn't have a UI, so I think that shielded us from a whole raft of bugs.
So there were lengthy discussions about the practicalities of build it and run it support model in John Lewis at this time. And at 50% of traffic, we figured as a team we should be providing 24/7 support. It's quite an important service. So we got a support rota in place and we got behind it and added this added responsibility pretty quickly. Again, many eyes were on us. They wanted to see if the theory of build it, run it really worked in practice. How would we deal with an issue? What was our mean time to respond, restore, and recover in the event of an incident? So keeping our operational stakeholders closely involved as the year progressed remained a priority for us. And the operational leadership really wanted to know that the service could take whatever was thrown at it. And they didn't want it to see it fall over in a heap. But we were on the case. We were pushing performance testing, adding resilience, adding alerting until we got complete confidence in our tool.
So we were one of the first services to use PagerDuty as well for alerts. One of the big things whenever we were tuning our alerts is we would think, is there something we want to be woken up for in the middle of the night? If so, make sure PagerDuty calls you on it. If not, if it's something you can just wait till the morning so that we can tidy it up in the morning, then we wouldn't get called out for it. So we were quite strict on the division between an immediate, something that needs an immediate fix, and something which is just fix this when you get some time.
So if we were being closely watched in peak 2018, we were fully under the microscope for peak 2019. I mean, if search fails, most people are not going to be able to shop. 1% of traffic, that's a concern. 100% of traffic, be a disaster if they couldn't shop. So the biggest risk we identified was something going wrong with the deployment, the human element. But we'd done hundreds of those, so backing out was quick. So we were comfortable. And a year on from our 1%, we'd earned widespread respect. Really need to rewrite that. Our principal goal achieved in less than 18 months. We were fully ready.
So this is our dashboard I talked about. We've got some stats at the top, CPU usage, number of items in the index. On the right-hand side, topics we were consuming messages from our data feeds. So those things would turn red if they've reached a particular threshold, and we'd know we had to do something about it. In the middle was what we found most interesting. So number of calls coming into our search API, the different colors of the different consumers, so mobile or web or the customer contact center, and the response time. And at the bottom is things that were indexed.
So, peak. Change management issued a one-size-fits-all set of rules to complete freeze and heightened awareness, which is where you have extra restrictions. And these were imposed across the whole of IT. Business as usual, normal stuff. But put simply, any change activity, unless it was absolutely critical, was best avoided. So, same as every year, no change. But that meant that in heightened awareness, we could only do deployments after midnight and before 7 in the morning, which was doable, but it was not ideal for us, and we knew that would be counterproductive. But, you know, we were a lone voice in the wider scheme of things. Hundreds of other teams that were not going to be worried about that. So as a team, we sat down and we discussed mitigating options. How do we deal with this? Branching code would have to be an option. However consciously, we tried not to go there. And we'd have to plan ahead, and we'd have to schedule our releases to clear that committed code through to production, because we were on that lovely continuous treadmill. And we'd have to do that in the middle of the night. One person tapping at the keys in their Batman pajamas, while the rest of the team were checking the insides of their eyelids. Our BAU proven ways of working were going to be disrupted for several weeks as a result of this. And the team were uncomfortable, but they were resigned. We'd make it work. We'd prove it was okay. And when January came round, we'd be able to share our experiences and our reflections of what that felt like. Because we knew there'd be many more agile teams like us in John Lewis by peak 2020.
Thanks. I think we haven't hit our time, actually, so we should skip over something. So we had 100% uptime. I stuck the significant digits in there, 100.00, because that's what it said in our graph. It wasn't just 99.9, it was really 100%. We did have one midnight deployment mishap, but even despite that, the uptime for the rest of the time averaged out to be 100%, which was nice. Our dashboards kept us confident. We felt we really knew what our service was doing and how it was doing it and how it was performing. And the search performance was sustained across the time. We've actually got a graph, I think, which shows, so that's a longer version of the other thing. Performance time here is relatively even. There's a bit of a spike on the 95th percentile there during that big spike at the top, which was actually a live load test. To higher percentage than happened on Black Friday itself. We had performance tested at various levels and decided what scaling we needed for each of those levels, so we could do it quite easily.
So, we came out peak. We added the last bit of functionality, which is about type head suggestions in January, and that cleared the way for decommissioning the legacy search system. What else happened? Remote working. We all know about remote working. But we'd always accommodated that in the team, so all our disciplines and our ways of working that we'd got in place, they stood us in good stead there. When the shops closed, online shopping doubled overnight, but the search service held up well, no problems, no issues. And Stephen and I moved on to different teams. We're now working in other teams, but the search team's still going strong, and a few faces are still there.
Yeah, the team progressed with more data science and machine learning being applied. They ran over 100 A/B tests over the course of a year, which is a lot. And I think it reflects how easy it was to get new data in, adapt, change something, redeploy, try something new, continually improve. And that quote on the left-hand side was somebody put that was looking into deployment times. So special shout out to Team Disto, average daily deployments every month for the past 2 years. So our esteemed author who wrote that said he'd never seen anything do that anyway. So I think that was a very good legacy of the ways of working of the team. And change restriction for peak 2020, which is just winter sale just gone, was tiny. It was bare minimum really, because we proved out so many things, and the other teams that had come on board had done the same.
So, thank you for being with us. I'm afraid we've run over a little. We've got some little takeaways for you at the end of our story, which we feel are key. And we've chosen a theme for each one, but there's lots of overlaps.
Yeah, so lots of small improvements really can have a big effect on your overall project or product.
Releasing early and releasing often, really key.
Yeah, resist complication and scope creep, so focus. This is the speed versus velocity thing. You can move fast, but make sure you're moving in the correct direction when you're going fast.
Product ownership being embedded in the team for us was really important and really focused the mind.
Yeah, treat the product as if it's live as soon as you can. So all the metrics you think you might want to know about it when it's live, put them in early on. You won't have any surprises when you go live.
And I think I've heard this in another talk today, but the whole team nurturing the product and refining those ways of working together, really important. No lone wolves, the team coming together.
Yeah, and be proud of your product. You know, want the customers to use it, stick it out there, get them on board. So thank you very much, everybody. I think we have a question slide, but we're running out of time for questions. So please do grab Sue or me later on if you want to ask any questions, or on Slack, actually, on the AHP Slack. Thank you.